Welcome. This is a College Democrats event. As many of you know, who may know me or may know College Dems in general, this is an event that's very important to us. Not only are we College Democrats, but we're Catholic University College Democrats. So to have a voice like Father Martin is huge to us. And so the way this will work is that after I speak, not Father Martin, Dr. White will do a quick introduction, and then Father Martin will take the floor. And then once you want to ask a question, you have to use the Q&A feature. You cannot use the chat. So please don't type your question in the chat. I will not see it, but if you have a technical difficulty or a personal point of concern, I'm happy to directly message you. But with that being said, I will repeat this right before we go into question and answer. The people that you see on the screen right now are my strong and beloved members of the executive board. As president, I wouldn't be able to do any of this without a faculty advisor like Dr. White, a strong voice like Father Martin, and of course my lovely team. So I want to just let the executive board know that when we go to Q&A, before we answer some questions in the chat, you will each have the opportunity to ask one question using your own voice to Father Martin for all the hard work you've done. But with all that being said, welcome everyone. I'm sure more people will file in. Just as I started talking, 15 more people came in, so I'm very excited and very happy for y'all to be here. Dr. White, take it away.
Well, thank you, Regina. Thank you, Father Martin, first. It's an honor to have you. And we've been looking forward to this event for some time now, believe me. And the main reason Father Martin is here tonight is his latest book, Learning to Pray, a guide for everyone, which I've just finished. If you don't know Father Martin, of course, he's the author of several books. I don't know how he does it. I can already tell you, Father, I am looking forward to your next book, which we got a hint of on Easter Sunday, which is going to be about Lazarus. And I found your message on Easter Sunday about Lazarus quite intriguing, so I'm looking forward to reading it. Many of you know Father Martin from his books, including Learning to Pray, but also Building a Bridge. And probably most of you know him as the chaplain for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, which we have watched very, very religiously, no pun intended. So let me just start with the first sort of question, comment. Father, reading this book, and I've listened to your discussions about it over the weeks, what really strikes me about it is how autobiographical it is about you. So we meet you in this book as a young man, a kid walking to school, studying nature, praying about a test or tests. We meet you as a dissatisfied layperson in the working world, trying to discern your vocation. We meet you as a Jesuit novice, asking about prayer. And the way I put the question is, am I doing this right? Which seemed to strike me throughout all of this. And then we meet you on various retreats. We meet you throughout a prayer journey. So I think the book is not just how we pray and what the right way may be to pray, but your own experiences in prayer. And I learned a lot about this, but I wondered if you could just start by commenting on your prayer journey as you describe it here.
Yeah, well, thanks, Dr. White. And first of all, I want to thank you and the College Democrats for inviting me, the Catholic Democrats, excuse me. I'm a big fan of CUA. I've been on campus a couple of times. I always feel so welcome there. And I want to just say the first time I came, I'll just tell this quick story. I was invited by a young woman named Pam, who I thought was going to be a 40-year-old college professor, and she was a student. And the students met me and welcomed me, and I just had a great time. And I just, since then, I really had a soft spot in my heart for CUA. Yeah, but to answer the question, one of the reasons I included that journey of prayer and my own prayer life is to help the reader understand that prayer really is for everyone. And I think the kinds of books that I like the most, spirituality books, are books where a person shares some of their own struggles. And I think one of the most important things I wanted to share in the book is that when I entered the Jesuit novitiate in 1988 as a 27-year-old guy, I had no idea how to pray. And one of the things that used to bother me is, I mean, I knew how to pray. I mean, I was raised Catholic, so I would say the Hail Mary and the Rosary. I still do the Our Father. I went to Mass and I asked for things. But people would say in the novitiate, things like, well, you know, I felt God was inviting me to look at this in prayer. And then I felt God really close, or, you know, in prayer, when I was praying over this, God asked me to look at this passage and I thought, what are you talking about? I mean, I really had no idea. Am I supposed to hear voices or see visions? And I think one of the main reasons that people, especially Catholics, try prayer and give it up is because they basically close their eyes, they sit down in a chair, and they don't know what to do. And they don't know what's supposed to happen. They don't know what can happen. And when something does happen, they think, oh, it's just a coincidence and I'm not made for prayer. And so I thought it was really important to ground the book in experience and really speak. I'm all about being blunt and direct to the question of what happens when you pray, which is for me, the kind of the heart of the book, because it's a very simple question that any spiritual director could tell you. But most spirituality books are very vague. They talk about God feeling close. What does that mean? So I try to describe in the book the kinds of things that happen, and through my own life and experiences, I want to show the reader that it really is for everybody, and even for me.
Great, thanks. Regina, we'll turn it to you for the questions from the executive board.
Awesome. Thanks, Father Martin. I also agree with many things that you say. One, in being blunt, and two, in closing my eyes and kind of not knowing what to say or what I'm doing.
Yeah, like now what?
Yeah. It's like I can be very honest and then I feel guilt, and you're like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. I think our first question is actually going to come from Chloe. So Chloe, do you want to unmute?
Of course. Awesome. So again, Father Martin, thank you so much for coming tonight. My question is about being a cafeteria Catholic, as some have called us in the past. So as a Catholic Democrat, I often find myself at odds with many of my peers here at CUA who call me a cafeteria Catholic because of the way that I vote, what student organizations I'm involved in. So I was wondering if you had any insight on still loving my neighbor when they harass me, but also being true to myself and what I believe that God is telling me through prayer and his word.
Yeah, well, look, I always say to people, how do we come to know what we're supposed to do in life and who we're supposed to vote for, and how we're supposed to live out our public lives? We're supposed to know the Gospels, right? We're supposed to know the Gospels, have an encounter with Jesus, right? Through the sacraments, through prayer. I mean, through all the ways that we're supposed to understand church teaching, right? We're supposed to, you can't possibly know every single thing the church has taught in every single thing, but we understand church teaching on all the important matters. And we use our conscience, right? We use our conscience as Catholics. That's the final arbiter of the moral life, the informed conscience. And certainly someone like yourself who's going to CUA, for Pete's sakes, has an informed conscience, right? And then to be at peace with what you decide to do and how you decide to live out your life. And, basically, there's no need to, I would say, take in the kind of, the name calling that people might do, and to be kind of peaceful about that. And I think, how do you love those people? It can be difficult, right? I mean, it can be difficult when people are, screaming at you and calling you names, but look, I mean, it's hard. This is, we just celebrated Good Friday, or marked Good Friday, and Jesus was mocked while he was crucified. So I always remind people, he's not just mocked when he's arrested by Pilate and when he's marched through the streets of Jerusalem. He's on the cross and they're coming by and mocking him, and he doesn't respond. And so eventually you start to realize that, a lot of the name calling is about them, and it doesn't bother you as much. So, yeah, but I mean, just be at peace if you're following all those dictates, of your conscience. It's a good question.
Sorry, I was not unmuted. Father Martin, actually, that was a great answer, and it also segues into my question. So, in your book, you elaborate on this very profound experience you had praying at the time when another book of yours was being published. I was wondering if you could talk about what that experience was like, because I think that many people who do pray don't really understand how profound experiences can be. They might like gaslight themselves into thinking it didn't really happen.
Yeah.
And then based off what your answer is, I would like to know how, as Catholics, do we lower the barriers to social inclusion in the church?
Wow, two big questions. Hold on a second. Excuse me. So the experience you're talking about, now I want to couch this first by saying I'm now about to share an experience that was very profound for me, and people who are watching and who are starting to pray, this doesn't happen all the time, right? So this is not a daily occurrence. And I think sometimes if people share these things, it can frustrate people because they say, oh, that kind of thing never happened to me. Basically, I was on retreat and I was praying over the passage called the rejection at Nazareth. And it's in the synoptics, and Jesus is returned to Nazareth, his hometown, and he's preaching in the synagogue. And he gets up and he proclaims essentially that he's the Messiah. And initially everybody is very happy with him. And then they, in a sense, turn on him for a number of reasons. And they drive him to the brow of the hill in Nazareth, which, by the way, you can still see. It's called Mount Precipice. And they're going to kill him. And I was on retreat, and I was struggling with someone in my community who was really dead set against me. And I normally, you see it from the point of view of the crowd, right? Like they didn't understand Jesus, and how often are we overlooking Jesus because God is too ordinary? But I saw it from the point of view of Jesus. So I'm imagining this. So let's talk about it in terms of prayer. I'm imagining myself in the scripture scene. It's called Ignatian contemplation. And I remember the insight I had, which is one of the gifts of the Spirit in prayer, was, wow, Jesus was able to do this in front of all these people. And this goes to Chloe's question, who he probably knew were going to not like that message. I mean, he's a smart guy. He lived with them for 30 years at least. And there he is proclaiming himself as the Messiah. And I remember asking him in prayer. Now, what does that mean? That means imagining myself asking him in prayer. I didn't see a vision or hear a voice. How could you do this? And the words that came into my head, again, I want to be really clear. I didn't hear them. They just sort of came into my mind, were, must everyone like you? And it was really a shock because my answer was, well, yeah, I want everybody to like me. And it dawned on me, again, the insight that, I was being invited to let go of the need for everyone to love, like, or approve of me, right? Because that would have enslaved Jesus in a sense. He would have never left Nazareth, right? And I thought, well, that's interesting. And it kind of related to what was going on in my Jesuit community. This is years ago, by the way. And then a couple of years later, this Building a Bridge book came out, which engendered a lot of controversy. And I thought, well, the prayer experience was sort of related to this particular person in my Jesuit community. But I think actually it was related to the experience of this book, right? People really, go online and type in James Martin LGBT, and you'll see all these really, people can disagree with the book and with me, but personal attacks. And I felt that it was an invitation to let go of the need to be liked. And I think that's a freedom. And so that's the kind of stuff that can happen in prayer. Again, not all the time. This was on a retreat, and it's kind of the high point of the retreat. When I sit down and pray every day, that doesn't happen all the time, but those kinds of things can happen. And I think it's an example in the book of an insight. Insights happen in prayer. And your second question about how do we work for a more inclusive church? I think, first of all, by paying attention to what goes on in our prayer and recognizing that the desire for that is God's desire, right? That doesn't mean everything you feel is God's desire, but the desire for a more just world, a more inclusive and welcoming world, a more loving world, a world where people are treated like human beings. That's God's desire. I think also listening to people on the margins, and not just LGBT people, but all sorts of people who feel like they're on the margins, refugees and migrants, the poor, Black men and women, people of color, on and on and on, right? And to listen to them and to welcome them. Jesus's movement, the movement for Jesus, is always bringing people from the outside in. Always. He never says, stay away, and he's also bringing the disciples out, right? So you think of like the woman at the well, the Roman centurion, the tax collector, Zacchaeus, on and on and on, lepers. So he's bringing people in. There's no us and them for Jesus. There's just us. So it's about making an us. Yeah, it's a good question. And being okay when people get angry at you for making an us. Dorothy Day used to say, which I love, like they did it, I'm paraphrasing. They did it to Jesus, so why wouldn't we expect them to do it to us? Like which is a good point.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. Regina?
I think Tyler's going to ask the next question. Thanks.
Father Martin, I have a question. This is for my friends in Dr. Love's civil rights class. So we know the church has come out pretty clear on civil rights issues across the globe, and particularly in the US. And yet still we see a lot of people who are Catholics on the individual level remaining complicit to the issues facing African Americans today. How can we better advocate against racism and encourage our brothers and sisters in faith to do the same?
These are great questions. That's a good question. I don't know if I could answer that just, thoroughly, because there's so much. I think one of the things that helps me is to listen to our African-American or Black brothers and sisters. In other words, I try to take my cues from them. Does that make sense? And two of the people that have been extremely helpful for me, and they'd be great to talk to you guys, Father Brian Massingale, who's a theologian at Fordham University, and a young woman named Olga Segura, who just wrote a book on Black Lives Matter in the Catholic Church. Really well done. And I try to listen to them. I really do. And I'll tell you, one of the things that Brian said, which just blew me away. And I think this is for me, and this is in addition to all the things I'm sure advocating for them and standing with them. And, but listening to them, and there I'm going with them and us and them, but listening to Black brothers and sisters, Brian said in a talk that the limits or the boundaries of the discussion on racism are what make white people uncomfortable. And that was kind of life-changing for me. So that's, in other words, and that has to be challenged. So there are things that Black men and women are saying that are going to be very challenging and really hard to hear. And, so for example, the Jesuits have committed to, I think, $150 million reparations fund for, we owned slaves, right? Back in the day in Washington, around Georgetown. That's a very simple way of describing it. And initially I thought, oh, wow, well, that was just, but, to listen to the descendants, as they're called, to hear their stories and to be open to that. And I think that they will tell us, or they will tell the community what needs to be done. So I think, so I listen to these people and be willing to be uncomfortable, I would say.
Right.
It's a good question.
Paul?
Yes. Father, as college students, life as an academic student naturally is very demanding, whether it be through our studies or through internships or other extracurricular clubs, sports, what have you. What do you say to those students who say that they just don't have enough time to try and connect with God through prayer? They just don't have the time.
That's a great question. What do I say to students who say that they don't have enough time to connect with God through prayer? First of all, I take them seriously, right? I don't want to say, oh, that's baloney. People are busy, right? You could say the same thing about like a single parent, right? Or, people who are working a couple of jobs. Usually I try to meet people where they are, which is what Jesus tried to do, which is to say, all right, let's talk about a certain kind of prayer. It's called the examination of conscience, which I talk about in the book, also called the examine, which is a review of the day where you look back and you see where God is, right? And it's a 5-step prayer. I talk about it in the book. I have a couple of videos on it. It's essentially you call them on the things you're grateful for. You review the day. You look back. You know, you're sorrow for your sins. You ask for God's grace for the next day. It's very simple. That's 15 minutes. And I usually say to people, all right, how important is God in your life? You say, oh, God's the most important thing in my life. And that's when the relationship model comes in, which I use in the book a lot as an analogy. And I say to them, okay, so do you spend much one-on-one time with God? Too busy. It's like, oh, well, God's the most important thing in your life though, huh? Mm-hmm. Well, what would you say if I said to you, I have this best friend and he or she is the most important thing in my life, or my sister or mother or something like that, and I never spend any one-on-one time with them? You would say, well, that's kind of a strange relationship. And how important is that person? So part of it is meeting people where they are, taking their schedules seriously, but also kind of challenging them and saying, what kind of a relationship is it if you never spend one-on-one time? I think that works much better than guilting people. You know, when I was growing up, I didn't grow up in a super Catholic family, but when I was growing up, one of the things that we heard now we don't call it CCD anymore. We call it religious education. One of the things I heard in CCD was about Mass. God gives you 24 hours a day. Can't you give God 1 hour a week? And, it was, there's a certain truth in that, of course, but it just makes you feel guilty, like you're just giving. So I think one, meeting people where they are. Two, inviting them to see it as a relationship. And then, just encouraging them and saying it's not just something you have to kind of put in time. It's, it's rewarding. The other thing, Paul, is a lot of times people who are super busy actually need prayer more because they're so, just to say, can you just be in the presence of God for 15 minutes? Wouldn't you like that? I mean, that can be a relaxation for them, not like, oh, I have to pray. It's like saying, would you like to kind of just walk outside and just be with God and be silent? It's a lot of it's how you present prayer. St. Francis de Sales said, he was once asked, how often should you pray? And he said, a half an hour. Unless you're busy, then you pray an hour. He was pretty funny.
Love that. If I could follow up quickly from Paul's question, because in your book, you describe the experience of a college student coming to you during exam period. Very stressful. Everybody here, I am sure feels stress, particularly during the pandemic and now as exams are coming on. But you write that she felt she needed God's presence. She couldn't feel it. She felt that she had been too distracted by her studies, and therefore God couldn't break in. Yeah. What would you say to people, including myself, that feel distracted in prayer, under stress?
Yeah. Well, I have a whole chapter on distractions. And I think one of the things that, as you know, one of the things that I think we do a number on ourselves as Catholics and as good Catholics, and even if there are people who are lukewarm Catholics or non-Catholics, they're here, you're obviously watching this because you care about prayer, is that we beat ourselves up if we're not completely undistracted. We expect we're going to be like Buddha. And Buddha probably had distractions too. So what I say to people is, look, you have a life. You have a life. You're all in school. You have exams. You're probably thinking about your families and COVID and everything and your future and all this. But mostly you're thinking about school and exams and all that. So it's on your mind. You're not a robot. You can't just say, I'm going to pretend that I don't have that. Now, there are some distractions that you can let go of. Like if a distraction, oh, I want to have a hamburger or something. Oh, I'm really hungry. You can let go of that. You can let go of it. You can let it go. One of the people I quote in the book, which I really like, Margaret Silf, a great insight. She said that it's like driving. I love this analogy. There's all sorts of stuff going on the side of the road. You see it, like cars and people, but you see it, but you're focused on. Now, does that mean that you're completely blind to? No, you see it and you don't pay attention to it. So you try to let these things go. Now, sometimes a distraction comes up that's not a distraction. I tell the story of a young Jesuit who said to me, I keep praying and all I keep thinking about is this guy who I had a fight with in my community. I said, maybe it's not a distraction. Maybe something God is kind of raising up. But finally, I think the most helpful thing that I've learned is what happens when you simply cannot get rid of the distraction. You know, you have you're sick, or you have a bad back, or it's probably it's too soon for you guys, but or you're worried about this exam, or you had a fight with someone. You know, what happens when that's when you say to God, one of my favorite prayers, God, I'm distracted and I'm still with you. And I always use the example of the relationship. So let's say that Regina and I, we go out, I finally get down to CUA after the pandemic, or I go out with all you guys, you know, and I say, I'm really sorry, I'm a little distracted today because why? Because I have, I don't know, I have some I have some essay to finish or something like that, or I have to get to a train. I'm worried about making my train something at the end of the talk. And you would say, Regina and everybody else would say, that's okay. You know, we understand why you're distracted. They're still happy I'm here, right? How much more, to quote St. Ignatius, can God do that with us? If everyone on this call would be generous enough to say, that's all right, you know, we're just happy you're here. How much more can God do that? So you try your best not to be distracted, but you can still pray while you're distracted, and God's powerful enough to be with you. And one of the things I said to this college student was, you think it's kind of, I was teasing. I said, you think it's kind of up to you. You know, you're too distracted, so God therefore cannot do something. God can do whatever God wants. So, but I think, God, I'm with you and I'm distracted is an okay prayer.
That's awesome. I wrote that down as you gave your example. So I'm going to bounce back and forth, and I'm going to move to some questions in the chat. And one question that I love, my good friend Abby Leary asked, what is the best way to grow closer to our Blessed Mother? And that can be through prayer or anything.
Oh, wow. Boy. Yeah, I have a big devotion to Mary. That's a great question. What's the best way to go closer to her? I would say off the top of my head, I would say learn about her, right? So read about her in scripture. I mean, this is what we have, right? We have our traditions, but we also have, this is the most, it's not just the Blessed Mother, it's Miriam of Nazareth, right? So learn about her in scripture and meditate on, she pondered all these things in her heart. So this is what we should do about Mary. Can you look at each of the times that she has appeared in scripture? And it's not a lot, right? And really kind of go deep. Like, what's going on at the Annunciation? What was that like for her? What's going on at Cana? One of my favorite stories. I was just reading about that today in a book, a fictional version of Mary's life. And what's going on at Cana? It's just so mysterious. So get to know her. She's a real person. I would say second, get to know her through prayer, right? And that's not simply saying the rosary, which is wonderful, but pray with her and to her. And then I would say, for me, now this, you don't have to believe in these things, but I find that get to know her through the apparitions. I'm a huge devotee, for example, of Lourdes, and I believe in Lourdes. Now that it's a private revelation, right? As is Fatima. I'm another fan of Fatima, Medjugorje, there's lots of them. You don't have to believe them, but I do. And I find they reveal something about Mary. But mainly, I think it's getting to know her. The more you get to know her in the scriptures, she's amazing. I mean, that's kind of an understatement. But like for example, like the Annunciation, what's the first thing out of her mouth? How can this be? And so when we think of Mary as this kind of sort of shrinking violet, which is the kind of typical way of presenting her, like, and she is docile to God's will, but she asks a question. That's an amazing thing. Or at the wedding feast of Cana, hey, they ran out of wine. And Jesus is pretty blunt with her. Woman, gune in the Greek, what business is this of yours? And by the way, here's a little thing I love. We talk about, I'd like going back to the Greek. The words that Jesus uses to Mary are the same words that the demon uses to Jesus, that the demon uses at Jesus in the synagogue. What business is this of yours? So it's strong. And she's very placid. Just do whatever he tells you. It's just just that exchange. What can we learn from her about that? So yeah, I'd say get to know her. There's a lot to get to know. Yeah, I'm a big Mary fan.
We have a couple of other questions too, Father, in the chat. I'm going to try to consolidate them
Sure.
into one. One is, what advice would you give to LGBTQ Catholics who struggle with feeling connected in their prayer? And related to that, what would you say to young LGBTQ students who seek community within the church and feel that they are being shut out, especially given Pope Francis's recent statements?
Wow. Well, I would take that. I think the first question, Dr. White, is actually, I don't want to say it's an easy question, but I would say that the desire that LGBT Catholics have to encounter God is the same desire that everyone has, right? It's a natural human desire. I think that the difficulty for a lot of LGBT people is that they have felt excluded from the church, and oftentimes they mistakenly equate the church with God, so that the church is not God, right? And so to encourage people to have first that experience of God's love in your life, and sometimes that takes a while for LGBT people to, not all the time, and it's getting easier now for certainly people your generation, but a lot of times they've been told terrible things about themselves, and they equate what they might hear from the pulpit with God and with their own belovedness, right? One of my favorite quotes is from a Jesuit named Howard Gray, who was at Georgetown for a while. That's another Jesuit school in DC. And he used to say to LGBT people, God loves you and your church is learning to love you, right? Which I think is very honest. And the second question, in terms of community in the church, one of the things I try to do with LGBTQ people, I'm not the only one who obviously works in this ministry, but in my own little way, is really listen to their experiences. So one of the things Jesuit formation has taught me is I never want to say, oh, get over that, or, oh, why should you feel like that? Or, oh, that, you know what I mean? Like to denigrate or to deny their experiences. If someone says, I feel rejected by the church, to listen to them and to say, why do you feel like that? And where does that come from? And there's usually good reasons that they can point to, right? So in other words, not to dismiss it. By the same token, it's an invitation sometimes to help them to see that they are as much a Catholic as who? As me, as Cardinal Gregory, as anyone on this call, as the Pope. They're baptized. And it's to really kind of claim that baptismal identity, which is holy in the church. And also to point out that, the church is on the way. The church is on the way. And then sometimes practically to point out things that are steps forward. Right. I mean, that document, the CDF document, which is a long conversation, was really hurtful to a lot of LGBTQ Catholics. At the same time, there's a lot of really good stuff going on, right? There's a lot of really positive things that are happening. And I think more and more they feel more welcome at the parish level too. So it's a mixture of things. And I really try to reverence where they are though, because that's where Jesus met people who were in pain too. And he tried to hear them where they were and not say, get over it, right? Jesus doesn't say get over it to people. Imagine I'm trying to think of he never says that. He would never say that to someone. A Roman centurion comes to him, my servant is sick. Well, what are you going to do? You stop complaining. No, he meets them. He tries to help him. He tries to listen to him. So yeah, take people where they are.
That was great. He does not say that to us. No,
he does not. Nor does he say, as Pope Francis said, Jesus does, I think it's in Amoris Laetitia, or maybe it's in a quote somewhere else. Jesus does not say to the homosexual person, get away from me.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that the way Dr. White synthesized those questions was very effective. So thanks, Dr. White. And then there are a couple questions that are similar, and it's about, there are some people who have said, I have strayed from my Catholic faith. I was raised Catholic, but I don't feel Catholic. How do I connect back to that? And then there's also it's an emic and etic perspectives. There's someone who's saying, how do I tell people who have gone out their faith that they can still pray and connect to Christ?
What did you say? It's a what perspective? I didn't catch that word.
Emic and etic. It's from Clifford Geertz, who's an anthropologist.
Oh, wow. It's over my
Insider
head.
and outsider.
Over my head.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Tell me, but did you say what? I don't know. Is that an acronym or?
No, it's EMIC and then ETIC. So insider and outsider.
You learn something new
I'll
every
send you an
day.
email about it.
No, that's really interesting. So the first one is, how do I connect to the faith? Or I feel
Yes.
kind of lost. And the second is what? That they feel that they're like kind of on the outside?
The second is, how do I, as a devoted Catholic, how do I help people who do feel outside of the faith?
I see. I think the second one is probably easier, which is to listen to them and to remember that for them, you may be the church, right? That if they're not going to mass, or they're not going to, they don't have a parish that they feel comfortable in, or they're questioning something, that you may be the church for them. So your willingness to listen to them, your willingness to be with them, your willingness to kind of, as I said before, practically help them, like help them find a nice parish or a good parish. You may be that church for them. In terms of people who are feeling out of sorts with the church, or don't feel, that they belong or that they're welcome. Again, a lot of times it's reminding them about their baptism. I think, so many people are told you're a bad, Chloe was saying this earlier, you're a bad Catholic, or you're this, you're that, you're a heretic, you're an apostate. People throw these words around. And, Jesus said, unfortunately for these people, Jesus did say, judge not, right? That's one of the things that people tend to overlook. And so it's sometimes reminding people that they are Catholic. You're baptized and you're part of the church. And it's a question of sometimes finding a church, a parish where you feel welcome, or a campus ministry where you feel welcome, or a prayer group, or whatever. And then also kind of giving them a sense of the church always being sinful, like any church and any religious organization. If we've learned anything from the sex abuse crisis, and certainly in 2002, and more recently, just it's been going on for a long time, obviously, but is that the church is full of sinful people who do sinful things. Every church is like that. And so part of it is helping them to see that, and to see that this is part of a human organization. But it really is, I think it's really being gentle with these people. There's so much there. One of the things that I often say to people is that I hear so much personally, and through letters and cards and emails and a lot of Facebook messages through my public page, a lot of pain and a lot of really hateful things that I think people they don't hear a lot. And so in other words, they're surprised. I say things to people that, this LGBT person was told this, and people say, that's impossible. No, this is what they're being told. And so it's to take that seriously. It's akin to, Tyler was talking about this earlier, it's akin to racism. I think that for many white people, and I think myself included, we would have heard stories about people being brutalized, and, I don't want to get too political, but when we see videos, it really opens one's eyes. And it's the same thing when you hear stories about, in various ways, people being mistreated by the church. You really have to reverence that and say, look, these people are feeling pain for a reason. And again, Jesus is our model. He's always going to people. It's like the woman at the well, which I love. Why is the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman in John, why is she there at 12 noon? It's a very strange detail. You see, like, oh, it's like she's there at 12 noon because the other women probably came earlier because it was cooler, and she's kind of ostracized. So she has to come in the heat of the day and walk far. And what does Jesus do? What does Jesus say? Oh, you're a terrible, and he says to her, you've been married 5 times, and now you're living with a man not your own, or not your husband. What does he do? He listens to her. She goes back and forth and is trying to figure out who he is. And then he commissions her to go and spread the good news. And interestingly, I just find this so beautiful. She leaves her jug behind, right? She leaves her water jug behind to go and spread the good news. which a lot of scripture scholars say is akin to Peter's leaving his nets behind. She's kind of an apostle. What's the point? The point is that she's struggling. She's in a lot of pain, ostracized and all by herself, in the heat of the day. Our response to that should be Jesus's response. Always. Even if, Chloe, I'm going to go back to what Chloe was saying, even if people make fun of you for doing it. It's okay.
Well, thank you, Father, for that. As a recipient of a fair amount of hate mail myself, you've given me some good advice here. We have a question from Matthew C. in the Q&A, who says that he's a proud graduate of Jesuit high school and he tries to pray the examen daily, but recently my prayer life has felt dull. Do you have advice? And you spend a lot of time in the book talking about dryness in prayer.
Yeah, Matthew. Well, first of all, hope you had a good experience at your Jesuit high school, wherever it was. Second of all, the first thing about dryness and dullness is that it's natural. Okay, if we use a relationship as a model, not every time you go out with your friend or your friends, is it going to be super exciting and fun? And sometimes you come back from a time with your friend and you're like, that was okay. It didn't feel like much happened, or we didn't click or whatever. It's the same in prayer. It can't always be sort of bells and whistles and, great big revelations. So dryness is common. The second thing, dullness, I think that's slightly different. I should have put dullness in there. That's interesting. I had the 7 Ds, should have had the 8 Ds. It's kind of dull, boring. Sometimes what helps is shaking things up a bit. I would not let go of the examen. You might think about doing the examen in a different way, maybe just focusing only on gratitude. Sometimes if people's prayer life is dull, I say, just focus on the gratitude, just to kind of shake it up. But I would imagine you're talking about other prayer practices you have. And I often say, shake it up. So if you're doing only sort of reading scripture, try something else. Try doing some spiritual reading, try doing some nature prayer, try doing some centering prayer, try doing, just try doing the rosary, so shake it up a little bit. And oftentimes that can help. I also think spiritual reading can be really helpful to sort of whet our appetites for prayer. But the main thing is don't give up. It's like any relationship. Let's say you go out with your friend, Matthew, let's say you go out with a buddy on campus, you go out for a beer or something, and things are like, much to talk about. You're kind of off. I'm sure you've all had that experience. You don't say, that's it. End of friendship. But a lot of people say that with God. I'm done, boring. I didn't get what I wanted. So that's why the relationship model is so helpful for people. And by the way, this is the insight of Father Bill Barry, a Jesuit priest, who was very influential in my own formation. And that model is so helpful to kind of diagnose problems. And so, yeah, I hope that helps, Matthew.
That was great. Also, on the Jesuit, I guess like highway right now.
Sure.
Someone asked one specifically about your vocation to the priesthood and like your personal journey with discernment, which is so formative. And then also what specifically drew you to the Jesuit order.
Wow. Gee, my vocation story. I'll try to, this could go on for like a year, but I'll keep it short. I grew up in a family that was Catholic, but not super Catholic. I went to the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. So I didn't go to any Catholic schools. Yeah, I went to Wharton, and I took a job at GE, 1982. I was a yuppie and having a lot of fun. I'll just leave that blank. And, I really enjoyed myself and made a lot of money and had all these nice suits, and it was fun. I'm in my 20s and I'm in New York and it's the 1980s. And then I took a job with GE in Connecticut and loved it. But then I started to get kind of bored. Now, business is a real vocation for people. There are probably a lot of business majors on this call. It's a real vocation for people. It just wasn't for me, but I couldn't see a way out. And then one evening I came home and turned on the TV and there was a show on PBS about Thomas Merton, Trappist monk. Never heard of him. No idea who he was. I kind of knew what monks, I knew what monks were. They lived in monasteries. I didn't know what a Trappist was. No clue. And I just was captivated by it. And one of the things I want to say is, how do we know our vocation? It's a good thing to say to college students. Part of it is our desires. What are you interested in? What captivates you? What fascinates you? This is how God is at work. Our deepest desire is to be in union with God. Everyone who's on this call is interested in praying. I mean, you're not on this call for any other reason, right? You're interested in prayer. Where does that interest come from? God. That's how God attracts us. How else would God attract us other than by awakening in us a desire for God, right? And so that's their most basic vocation, the desire. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you, O Lord, from St. Augustine. I love that quote. Mm-hmm. If he had never written anything else, that would have been enough. But he wrote a lot of stuff. And the other vocation in terms of what we want to do for our lives, our careers, is also about desire. So God was kind of calling me through desire. I asked my parish priest. I said, I think I want to be a priest. He was like, who are you? Because I wasn't like active or anything. It's funny enough, you guys will laugh, but this is true. This is not false humility. When I entered the Jesuits, people would say like, oh, I was on this committee at church and I was in the Young Catholic this. And I thought, what? It's like, does that even exist? Like, I went to mass and then I went home, so, so I didn't know much about anything. And the local parish priest said, you should talk to the diocese, your local archdiocese, which is, go Phillies, Philadelphia. You should talk to the local diocese, which was Bridgeport at the time. I was living in Stamford, go Connecticut. And then I was talking, and he said, you might as well contact the Jesuits, because they were up the street in Fairfield University. And I was like, oh, okay. No idea what a Jesuit is. I mean, I heard the word. I thought, I'm going to tell you something. You're not going to believe this. You will not believe it. All of you very intelligent Catholics. I remember being at my parish, St. Leo's Parish in Stamford, Connecticut, one Sunday, and they had several people on I would say the rotation, we would say now, of different religious orders coming in to preach, coming in to celebrate mass. You know how it is in different parishes. And I remember vividly, it said, so-and-so OSB, Benedictine, Order of St. Benedict, so-and-so SJ, I remember this, so-and-so OFM. So they had a Benedictine, Order of St. Benedict, a Jesuit, Society of Jesus, and a Franciscan, OFM. And I remember thinking, don't laugh, because I think a lot of people are there, that these must be degrees. These must be academic degrees, or there's some sort of, they study somewhere and they become a Jesuit. I had no idea of community life. And I met the Jesuits and I just thought, these guys they seem to fit. I felt at home. I felt really at home. And I joined knowing very little. A friend of mine said, you spend more time like trying to research a car, like what car you were going to buy. And my friends in college, you'll appreciate this. You're all college students. So I still have very good friends with my friends from Penn. They took a bet of how long I would last. And the outside bet, the longest bet, was 6 months. That was the longest. Everyone was like a week, 2 weeks, a month. So I should have gotten in on that bet. I could have made a lot of money, but then I would have had to turn it in. So yeah, so it was through desires. It was kind of paying attention to your desires.
We have a question from Elena Smith, who wants to know, what's it like to actually meet with and consult with Pope Francis?
Oh, it was just, it's beautiful. So I'll tell the story. We have some time. It's kind of a fun story. Now, he asked me not to share the stuff of the conversation, but I'll tell the story because you guys will appreciate it. Look, I'm a consultor to the Vatican's Dicastery for Communication. What does that mean? The Dicastery for Communication is the Vatican's committee on exterior communication. So the Holy See Press Office, L'Osservatore Romano, the Pope's Twitter account, the Pope's Instagram account, all that stuff. I'm a consultant. That is a very, 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 very low position. The Pope appointed me to that. I was delighted. I don't go to Rome very much, So 2 years ago, 2019, the book had been out, the LGBT book had been out for 2 years. And I was going to Rome for this meeting. And a friend of mine said, who knows the Pope very well, would you like to meet him? And someone just put up a dream, and it was a dream. And I said, yeah, like, as long as he wants to meet me. I mean, I don't want to like, I don't know how you would do this. I don't want to like push him or be pushy, but if he would like to meet me, of course. So my friend writes back and says, immediately, he says, he wants to meet you. I said, wow. So I said to another friend, I have a lot of friends who know him. Obviously, I mean, I'm a Jesuit, so there are connections. And I said, now what? And he goes, well, when you go over to Rome, you're going to be in a big meeting with all the people in the dicastery, 400 of them, all the employees of Vatican Radio. They have a lot of people in Vatican Radio, believe me. And you're going to be in this meeting, and you go up to him and you introduce yourself. And then he'll take it from there. And I just thought, this is never going to happen. This is crazy. This is crazy. It's never going to happen. So I go up, I go up, there he is, beautiful. He's like, I know this sounds crazy. He kind of like glows. He's like the white, and he's tanner than you would think. So I go up feeling like an idiot. And I say en español, Santo Padre, mucho gusto. I mean, because he speaks Spanish. His English is not great. Mucho gusto. Me llamo James Martin. Soy un jesuita. And he goes, oh, he says, quiero un audiencia con usted. And I just heard the word audience, and I said, yo también. Me too. I want an audience with you. And he says, talk to this guy. So there's a secretary next to him. He takes out, I'm not kidding, he takes out this little crummy piece of paper. He said, what's your phone number? I thought, I can't believe this. So in Italian, I say quattro, thinking, oh my God, I have to get this right. If I mess up, they'll never be able to contact me. So I go out, I'm so excited. And I email my friend and I say, oh, I go back to the meeting. And they're all like, wow, what was that about? I said, the Pope wants to have an audience with me. Now, these are the people, they see him all the time. They're very chill. I say, now what? They said, va bene, Father. He will contact you. He knows where you are. They said, and auguri, congratulations. It's wonderful. They're very sweet. So I'm all excited. I call my friend. He goes, he said he wants to meet you. He'll meet you. He's the Pope. So 2 days later, I get a letter in the mail at the Jesuit community, formal invitation. Pope wants to meet you. I couldn't believe it. This day. By the way, no RSVP. They figure you're not going to have anything better to do. You're going to say, oh, I can't meet. Monday's not good. How about Tuesday? Monday. So I didn't tell anyone because I thought, this is never going to happen. This is never going to happen. I just thought something's going to happen. Just not going to happen. He's going to go out. Something's going to happen. Nope. Monday, I get up. I go to the Vatican. Swiss guards salute you. Their father, come in. They bring me into this waiting room. It's very exciting. I say, by the way, can I have a translator? Subito. Done. Like, wow. They bring me up to a throne room, another throne room. Finally, I'm outside his door. It's just me. Door opens, an entire bishops' conference comes out. They're like, who's this guy? And then I go in, and he could not have been more welcoming, gracious. I sat down. It was very moving to me, but I was not nervous because I wasn't there to convince him of anything or get something from him. I just wanted to kind of be the voice of LGBT people. And I said, thank you for seeing me. There was a photographer there. He met me in the Apostolic Palace. They sent pictures out. That's his way of kind of sending a message. I was like, wow. I was like, I recognize this room. I didn't say that. And I sit down and he says, I said, oh, I have a letter from my nephew. He's 15. He's taking Francis as a confirmation name. Oh, he said, do you think you'd like me to write him a letter? I was like, yes. Oh, so he takes it out, he writes him a letter, he's thinking about it. Then he says, I love this. I said, and someone told me to say this. Now it was just me, a translator, and him. I said, what would you like to talk about, Holy Father? And he goes like this. What would you like to talk about? And I brought out a paper and I read him something about LGBT people. And since we're recording, I can't say what it is, but I talked about the situation and the struggles of LGBT people. He was warm and attentive and funny. He's really with it. He asked me not to share what we talked about because, just so we could talk freely. And I felt like I was walking on air. And at the same time, I felt completely relaxed. It was the strangest thing. Because, it was meeting another Jesuit. As I said, I wasn't there to get something, like I need you to do this or I want to convince you. So I was just kind of their voice. It was lovely. It was just lovely. It was a highlight of my life. And so I felt really inspired and encouraged and just really grateful. I couldn't believe it. So, so it was really lovely. It was a beautiful experience. I really, one of the high points of my life.
We all need that encouragement.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you, at the end, I knelt down and got his blessing and I walked out. I'll tell you, I've never felt this way. You know, the expression walking on air. It's like I'm walking on air. I actually felt, it must be some psychological thing. I felt lighter.
There you go.
So it was beautiful.
We have we also have an interesting question from Allison Seegers, which is, can you tell us any secrets about The Late Show or Stephen Colbert? We promise not to tell anyone, she says.
Secrets of The Late Show. I know the old Colbert Report better than I know The Late Show. I was only on The Late Show once. Well, I tell you one secret. This may not be the most secret thing. He's a lot of fun. What you see on TV is what he is. He's fun. He's funny. He's quick, super smart, very Catholic. He really knows his stuff. What did he say? He said something to me once. So I would go on the Colbert Report a couple times, and he said something like, oh, I know what it was. This is funny. He said, yeah, my wife saw my scapular the other day, and I was like, wow, you have a scapular? Oh yeah, I have a scapular. I have the blah, blah, blah. It's like, and I said to him, this is the first time I was like, well, you are really Catholic. So he likes that. He's a very kind, sweet person, and he's just as quick in person and funny. So I really like him. Other secret, he would say, it was a strange character that he was playing before. As you remember, he was playing a character on the Colbert Report. I guess you guys are old enough to remember that. And he would say to people, and every time I would come in, even though I would come in a couple times, he would say, which I thought was great, treat me like an idiot. That's what I want you to do. And I think one was successful in that show if you played into the character, like if you're literally talking to someone who sounds idiotic. So I really enjoyed it. I enjoy going on, and it's, you reach more people on there than you do in a year of homilies.
Right.
He's super Catholic. He really is super Catholic.
He is Catholic. There are great videos of when he talks about teaching CCD, or I guess religious education, which I love. And
he came into, there's a video that you can see, I think, on our YouTube channel. He came into our office once and I interviewed him. And
really?
And we were singing like The King of Glory, which I actually like that song. He knew, like, look, I know, look, we always joke in the Jesuits in our community, like, we know all the verses. He knew all the verses. It's pretty impressive.
He is impressive. Andrew, I don't know if you have a question that you'd like to ask.
Hi, Father. First, I want to apologize. It just came to me that I'm from Lansdale, Pennsylvania.
There you go. I have cousins in Lansdale.
Oh, really?
Yes.
it took me a quick second,
Yeah,
but
that's okay.
my question is about just kind of about like organization as a whole. It's a rare opportunity that we're a college Democrats branch that's also where most of our membership does participate religiously within the Catholic faith. And within the past year, I think we all, again, not speaking for everyone, but we all kind of use our platforms to advocate for social issues and injustices. And some people are very quick to criticize us for what we are advocating for. And people sometimes use their religion to legitimize discrimination in some form of capacity. So my question is, what is your typical response to people that use their religion to to legitimize discrimination?
Well, that's a great question. I would say a couple things right off the top of my head. The first is to help them to see religion and Christian teaching and Catholic teaching in a different way. I mean, a lot of times I think people who are quick to critique actually don't know the church's long and rich history, of Catholic social teaching. And when you say it to them, when you say, well, let's talk about solidarity. Oh, where are you getting that from? Well, that's actually one of the tenets of Catholic social teaching, where you quote, St. John Paul, who says racism is a sin. Where are you getting that from? Well, that's from St. John Paul. So a lot of times and you have to do it gently. It's a kind of invitation to understand Catholic social teaching in a different way, Catholic teaching, or even the Gospels in a different way. So, for example, the question of refugees and migrants, which is kind of near and dear to my heart. Let's look at what Jesus says about welcoming the stranger. Let's look about what the Old Testament says about it. So it's inviting them to do it. That's the first thing. The second thing is not getting bothered if they disagree with you, right? And that's okay. And the third thing is being open to their change. Again, to listening to their points as well. But I tend to think, any religious argument that is going to marginalize people is not really a authentic religious argument. Because again, this is not the way Jesus acted. And the other thing, Andrew, is to be persistent. You look at someone like Helen Prejean. So Sister Helen Prejean, author of Dead Man Walking, she worked for decades. And before her, people were working for decades to help the church understand the inadmissibility, which is now church teaching, of the death penalty. That took a long time. You look at someone like Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day, which I love this story. Dorothy Day was told by I think it was Cardinal Spellman, may have been someone earlier, the Archbishop of New York, to take the word Catholic off the Catholic worker. So she said, well, okay, we'll move to Brooklyn, called his bluff. And that doesn't mean she's disrespectful to anybody, but part of it is knowing that it can be a long fight, right? But, as we were saying before, if you understand church teaching and the Gospels and your conscience, to also you remain firm. I think that's important too. And the other thing is never to be uncharitable. Ever. No ad hominem, even if they do it. And look, I'm all over social media and you see all these terrible things. You're a heretic, you're this, you're an apostate. You just don't give it back. You can't give it back. And you'll feel a lot better if you don't. Because it can be desolating, a favorite Jesuit word, to engage in that kind of, you're a bad Catholic. No, you're a bad Catholic. No, you're a bad Catholic. It's useless. Jesus also knew when to shake the dust off his feet too. Move on. Doesn't mean he hated that, actually he did to condemn some towns, and we don't do that because we're not Jesus. But, it is, if one town doesn't listen to you, shake the dust off your feet and move on. It's okay.
That was a great answer. And also a quick side note before I get to Nate's question is that last year, the mission, like the statement at Catholic University, was a dedication to look at the issues and ministry towards migrants and refugees through the light of the church. And it was really moving. And I think it helped a lot of people understand the issue from not a political standpoint, like we're kind of predisposed to, but a human standpoint.
Yeah. And it's shocking. Some people just don't know Catholic teaching, especially Catholic social teaching. Some of the stuff is really radical.
Yeah.
I mean, like Pope Benedict talking about, redistribution of wealth, and you're like, what? It's like, yeah, that's part of, I think in the United States, there can be this kind of misunderstanding of the church's teaching.
Yeah, no, anywhere that humans have to interpret.
Yes, that's a
God
good point.
is the church.
That's a good point. Yeah, right.
Nate, do you want to ask your question?
Hi. So a lot of people spoke about today how you're like the Colbert chaplain, and you've been very open to going on shows, programs, and channels that like don't have a more traditional Catholic audience, like The Late Show and things like Now This. So do you think it's important for Catholic figures to like reach out to individuals through shows like these, through like more unconventional, secular kind of means?
Yes, definitely. And I'll tell you a story why, Nate. It's Nate, right? Not Nathan. Is that right, Nate? Okay. So we look to Jesus as our model. So Jesus met people where they are. And I like to say that he does that in two ways. First of all, he literally goes to where they are. Like Jesus, after the rejection at Nazareth, goes from Nazareth to Capernaum on the Sea of Galilee to call the first disciples, Peter and Andrew and James and John. Okay, so he literally goes to where they are. Now, in that time, it was more traditional for the student to seek out the rabbi. Okay, which makes sense. Like, may I study with you? Jesus turns that around and he goes and calls these people. Okay, he calls them. So he goes there. So that to me is kind of the idea of the places, right? Like The Late Show or Now This. But on a deeper level, then when he's there, what does he do? How does he speak to them? So Jesus is a carpenter from landlocked Nazareth, is now on the Sea of Galilee, and he sees Peter and Andrew, James and John. By rights, he should use carpenter's language. Come after me and we will lay the foundation of God's reign. Come after me and we will build God's house. What does he say? You all know the quote, come after me and I will make you fishers of people. He's speaking in their language. He's speaking to fishermen as fishermen. Also, when he does that miracle in Luke, in the Gospel of Luke, it's the miraculous catch of fish, right? For Peter, this is that alternate call story. What's the miracle that he does for Peter? It's fish. So even the miracle is in Peter's language, right? So he not only goes to where they are, but once he's there, he speaks their language. And so I think that's what we need to do. So not only should all of us, be in these secular places, that wherever it is, you could say The Late Show or Now This, or you could also say, a bar or out with friends or, in someone's dorm room, right? Kind of a secular place. Not only do you meet them where they are, but then when you're there, you speak in their language, which is what Jesus did. He spoke, and then to everyone else, how does he speak? He speaks in parables, right? As C.H. Dodd said, metaphors are similes drawn from nature or common life. It's very, talking about a woman searching for her coin or, a guy who loses his sheep. It's talking their language. So, yeah, so that's how I see that kind of work. Going to where they are, and then once you're there, speaking their language.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's a great question.
That was a good question. So we're going to have two more questions from Justin and Rebecca. Justin, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure, Regina, I'll just pull mine up. Okay, so Father Martin, in your book, you outline 5 different ways to pray: presence, gratitude, review, sorrow, and grace. And I was wondering, which of those is the most important to the overall process of praying and why?
Yeah, that's a great question, Justin. So that outline is for the examination of conscience, which is the daily prayer that people do at the end of the day. It's like 15, 20 minutes, and it's an essential prayer for people to kind of review where God is. That's a great question. I would say if push came to shove, I think gratitude's the most important part of that particular prayer, because we tend to move on I say in the book, if someone says, "How was your day?" Oh my gosh, this terrible thing. I got to see on my test. It was like, whoa, 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 whoa. How about how was the weather today? Oh my gosh, it was so beautiful. Well, why did you go right to that? Because we're generally problem solvers, and our minds tend to go to the negative thing because we're conditioned that way. So working against that is gratitude. St. Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, said that ingratitude was the worst, most abominable, and origin of all sins, which I love. So in that prayer, which is called the examination that you just described very well, I would say gratitude's the most important part. And then there's other ways of praying too. There's Ignatian contemplation and Lectio and nature prayer. But in that prayer, I would say gratitude. Good question. I've never been asked that. That's a really provocative question.
Thank you.
Justin is a reporter, so he knows how to ask the tough questions.
Yes. Okay.
And then I think, Rebecca, you're going to take the last question. I think it's a little bit more lighthearted than some other deep topics we've touched on.
Yeah, so thank you again so much for coming. As Regina said, it's a very lighthearted question. So I watched your interview on Stephen Colbert, and I saw that your friends help you to choose what you give up for Lent. So I was really wondering what you gave up for Lent this year, if you'd be willing to tell.
Yeah, so I have this strange thing that happened to me when I was at Penn. I had many, many friends who were Jewish, and probably half my friends were Jewish. I had many more Jewish friends than Catholic friends. And one Lent, I think it was in my sophomore year, my friend said, "So what's Lent? And you like give something up?" And I said, "Yeah, you give something up for 40 days." Well, I'll never forget this. And was like great insight of logic, a great example of logic. And they said, "Well, who decides what you give up?" And I said, "Well, I do." And they were like, "Well, how hard is that?" You're going to just give something easy, which is actually interesting. And I said, "Well, no, I mean, I try to give up stuff that's hard, just to, well, who do you think should tell me what to give up?" We should tell you what to give up. So the first year they told me to give up orange soda, which I used to drink by the can to stay up at night, to do all-nighters, and snowballs, those like Hostess things. I had a big sweet tooth. When I got to college, I was like, "Hey, I can eat whatever I want. I'm going to have like 1 million snowballs." So I gave those up. And then they continued it for a while. And then my friend Rob kind of took it over. He was my roommate after college, and he would assign me things. And I kind of, obviously I gave up other things too, but I kind of enjoyed this sort of exterior, this extrinsic, penance. And so for the last 40 years, he and now his family, he and his wife and his son now, who's like, he's a college sophomore, they tell me what to give up. So this year it was, sometimes I forget, he gets mad at me. It's a candy, a spice, and a food. So this year it was mints, M-I-N-T-S, za'atar, which is a Hebrew Israeli spice, which is quite good actually, and waffles. So some years it's really hard. Some years it's like hamburgers. I was like, "Rob," he's like, I thought you needed something hard this year. Yeah. And, when we were younger, it was pretty funny. I mean, there were funnier things, which I probably should not say on this thing, but yeah. So now it's his family that gets to do it. And I try to do it. Yeah. Colbert was real. The people are fascinated by that. And they wait. And so he now he emails me. It used to be a phone call. He emails me every Ash Wednesday, like at 7 a.m. And it's like, it's a subject line is like, "Your Lenten penance." So funny. I have decided, he's very funny, and he makes fun of the Catholic stuff, which most of my Jewish friends do, by the power invested in me, blah, 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 blah. I declare that. It's hysterical. So yeah. But I this year was not so hard. So, but some years it's been pretty hard.
Well, Father,
and sometimes I'll be somewhere. I'll be at a restaurant, and I'll be like, be something like really weird. Like one year was cilantro was the spice, and I got something with cilantro, and I was like, "Oh, I can't eat this." And someone's like, "Why not?" And I gave it up for Lent. "You gave up cilantro for Lent?" Well, I was told to give up cilantro for Lent. Someone told you to give up cilantro. So it's kind of fun. And every year people ask me. So it's, and he loves the attention. I'll tell you a funny story. He's very funny. His name's Rob Schlackman. And I was interviewed by someone once, and I mentioned it on NPR. And he wrote a letter, I think, to NPR that was published somewhere. It was like in the Times, something like that, in the Times, or someone asked me. And the letter was, might we not hear more about this Rob fellow? He sounds fascinating. Anyway, so it is. I'm glad we could end on a lighthearted note.
Before we let you go, Father, and we do want to thank you so much, your answer reminds me of something, which is some years ago, Pope Benedict came to Catholic University. And we had, at that time, we had a priest who was serving as president, now the Bishop of Trenton. And so he had gotten word that the Pope was coming. He was going to give a major address to Catholic educators and so forth. And so in an anteroom before the Pope gave his address, the president had learned that that Pope Benedict really liked Fanta orange soda. And so this room was filled with cans of Fanta orange soda. The Pope came in, saw the soda and said, I hate orange soda. And so there was a lot of free soda that was distributed on campus to the students back then.
That's a great story. Now, how did he get such bad information? Or was that
apparently somebody had told him?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I wonder if they were trying to get him in trouble. Oh, you know what the Pope really likes?
Yeah.
Can I tell you a funny story? So when we were before we conclude, first of all, I want to say thank you for everyone for inviting me. Thank you to Catholic Democrats. Thank you to the executive committee. Thanks to Dr. White, Regina, who helped pull this together. Really wonderful questions. Really just some of the best questions I've ever been asked. Just beautiful. I'll tell you a funny story. This is a story about why you should learn languages. So at this meeting with the Pope beforehand, the part that I can talk about, the Pope met with the Dicastery for Communication and gave this long talk, very animated, in Italian. And my Italian's really not great. And, I always think of trying to follow something in a foreign language that you don't know, like sort of swimming in sand. You really have to keep up. And if you lose your focus, you just feel like, I don't know what they're talking about. And you just kind of give up. But I kept hearing the word authenticity, autenticità, whatever it is in Italian. He kept saying it, authenticity. So this is your point about the Pope. So I was like, wow, he really likes authenticity. So I go into the meeting of our little dicastery, and they said, oh, they're very nice. They're like, oh, Father Jim, how did you like the Pope's talk? I said, well, my Italian's not really good, but I love that he was focusing so much on authenticity. He goes, no, he said he hated that word because he thinks it's overused. It's a stereo. I was like, well, it's probably good that, I'm not working in the Holy See press office.
Well, again, the book is Learning to Pray, a guide for everyone. There's much in here that's very relatable to our college audience. Father James Martin, thank you so much. We are deeply, deeply appreciative.
My pleasure. Should we end with a little prayer?
Shall we? Yes.
So let's just take a moment and be grateful for our church, for this community, for Catholic University, for the Catholic Democrats, and most of all, in this season of Easter, for the gift of our risen Lord who is among us through the Spirit. So, loving God, we thank you for bringing us together. We thank you for all these great gifts and all these great graces as we enter more and more deeply into a relationship with you. Open our hearts and our minds to receive all the graces you want us to receive. And we ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, everyone, and happy Easter, too.
Thank you, Father.